Mhm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mind Your Mission, a podcast where we dive into God's Word and search for how He outlines for us as women to live as Christians. We are really excited that you're joining us today and excited to get into today's episode. But before we jump too far into it, I wanted to pause and acknowledge the heaviness that our country is feeling right now. The past week has brought multiple violent attacks that have taken far too many lives. One is too many, but when we have school shooting, train attack, Charlie Kirk shooting, another school shooting, there's just a lot going on. And here locally, the Naval Academy was on lockdown the other day. And then, of course, we're all already emotionally a little bit raw remembering 9/11. It's been a strange week, and one that I hope is not the norm. I was in the command center on Wednesday when the news broke that Charlie Kirk had been shot, and from the moment that the news picked it up around 2:30 p.m. Eastern time to the time that I left around 6 p.m., and then I was on duty all day Thursday, so all day Thursday as well. It was just a constant stream of footage, commentary, and then personally just disbelief. And it's not great to just sit and listen to the news all day. My biggest recommendation for people is just to get off your phones and stay in real life, because real life is not all craziness like that. But I'll tell you, the one thing that I did gain from absorbing the news all day is just a realization that the gospel is being shared right now in a way that it never has before. Those who were lukewarm before this got fired up, and the name of Jesus is being proclaimed, and that's what Charlie would have wanted. And it's so fascinating to hear even Fox, who, I'm sure a lot of people on Fox are Christians, but they don't outwardly say it every single day. But even they were speaking so boldly, and news outlets that don't usually say it were speaking so boldly. So it was very interesting. And online, people are reacting in a variety of ways. Some are posting, of course, prayers and grief. Others are choosing silence or only acknowledging certain events. But no matter where you fall, we're all feeling something right now. And I wanted to provide my personal opinion on a question that I saw the other day on one person's social media, and it was the question of why the news and why the country is reacting so heavily to Charlie Kirk versus some of the other incidents. Why does he get so many honors and praises from high officials, and why does he get all the news attention? And no, his life didn't matter any more than the kids in the school shootings' lives did. Our lives are all worth so much value. But the thing is that what Charlie stood for and what he preached, it felt like a direct attack on the one thing that we as Christians believe is actually going to save us. The gospel is actually going to save us eternally, and the values and the principles that Charlie lived by, I think, are what actually are going to save us as a country. And so, no, we're not bringing attention to it because I loved watching Charlie. He's a great guy. Yes, that's all true, but we're bringing attention to it because everyone who didn't listen to Charlie, go listen to Charlie and hear what he had to say, because he was saying the right things that are actually going to save our country. My sister, who is 4 years younger than me, she made the comment that it's so sad we live in a world where we can't disagree with someone respectfully. And my first reaction to that was a little bit of anger. I thought, yes, we can. That's what our country is founded on. We live in a country that values freedom of speech, religion, and truth. I was raised to believe that. It was instilled in us from the beginning. I don't know if you remember, Liz, but elementary school for me, this didn't exist. Things like this happened and everybody shared feelings. We had all the same feelings and beliefs and founding. This nation was built on foundational freedoms, and I still believe that to be true, and I won't let bad things like this happen convince me that it's not true, because we have to have hope. And to preserve that, we need to return to the basics, to a common direction. Like it or not, this country's founding was deeply influenced by biblical principles. And if we return to God's word, if we mind our mission and set our course on what he outlines, and if you're wondering where to even begin, just start with the 10 Commandments. We will find guidance, peace, and clarity there. And that's the only way that we're going to thrive individually and as a nation. So yes, people are calling for common ground, but the thing is that common ground has to be truth. Charlie knew the truth and wanted as many other people to know it as possible, and that's our same mission here. So I know that that's a lot. It's heavy. I encourage you to, like I said, get off your phones. Like, even stop this episode now. Just like stop listening to stuff and just sit and think about how you feel. Like, let yourself feel what this week has brought, every part of it, even like the personal stuff you have going on. Journal, like, just let yourself feel and reflect and think deeply. And then, of course, we encourage you, go in the Word and pair that deep reflection and thinking with God's Word, and it'll change your life. So just wanted to throw that out there before we jumped into today's episode.
Yeah, I've had to get off social media at different times this week just because I feel like everything is so heavy, and I didn't think Charlie's death would affect me as much as it has affected me, and I think you hit it like right on the point. Like, they took someone's life for what he believed, and like our beliefs are similar to his, so it does feel like a direct attack on our beliefs. And Matt and I watched his wife. She addressed the nation last night, and I'm going to read something that she said. It was in her Instagram post too, so that's like what I'm reading it from, because I don't remember exactly what she said last night. But I think it's something we can kind of all take away from this as Christians. And it's crazy to me that she was able to do that last night after all the things she's been through. I'm like, wow, that is like a strong woman of the Lord and someone who has such a strong faith. But she said, they have no idea what they just ignited within his wife. If they thought my husband's mission was big now, you have no idea. You, all of you, will never, ever forget my husband, and I'll make sure of it. And just how she is using such a tragic incident to continue to preach the gospel and share like what Charlie stood for is just amazing. And I think we can all do that and all partner together and do that. And so I've been encouraged this week, despite all of the darkness of everything going on, of just Christians like banding together, but just being able to agree on this and come together on this has been encouraging. And I think has really, like you said, lit a fire in a lot of people who maybe have been lukewarm. And like at times I've been lukewarm. So I think that is something we can remember going forward, because I don't want to forget Charlie, like his wife said, like his mission will still go on. And I have peace knowing that he's in heaven. And she talked last night about how he's hearing the words he's always wanted to hear, like, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so resting in that, knowing he is in heaven forever.
Yes. And the one part that I am really passionate about non-Christians not hearing wrongly is when we say we're banding together and that we will not stop and like the fight is not over. When we say things like that, like it is not against one side. It is not against, certain political ordeals. It is against evil. Like, we are not stopping the fight against evil. Like, just hear that clearly. Like, evil exists in this world, both physically and in the spiritual realm, and we're fighting against that. We have the God on our side who actually can win against that. And so that's what we're fighting against. So just hear that and internalize that properly. Like, I don't want anyone to get that wrong. But anyway, this week's episode is going to be a discussion on setting the tone in our homes. And after a week like this, I actually think that today's topic feels even more meaningful because in a time, especially I feel like as a mom thinking about my children's future, like fear would be the easy choice, but we're called to live with courage and to point others toward the hope that we have in Jesus. And although man may try to thwart God's plans through violence and death, Jesus has already come to the grave, and we don't have to live in fear because we know who's waiting on the other side. So a moment that made me reflect last weekend, we had a friend visiting. She's in the Coast Guard here for training, and she's a few years younger than us. She's newly married, freshly graduated, and she's navigating the early stages of adulthood. She stayed with us from Saturday through Sunday, and as she was getting ready to leave Sunday night after dinner, she said something that made me pause. She said, "Thank you for letting her stay," and then said, "Your home is so peaceful." I was caught off guard when she said this because, truthfully, that's not how I've been feeling lately. Between a busy work schedule, chasing a toddler, being pregnant, peaceful isn't necessarily the first word that I'd use to describe our home. But her words made me reflect and ask the question, what actually makes a home feel peaceful? And I realized that it's not about spotless rooms or perfectly curated decor. It's not candles or an ambiance or like an aesthetic Instagram looking living room. Like, sure, those things are nice, and sometimes I try because they do add, joy sometimes, but most days there are toys everywhere, crumbs on the floor, laundry's undone, and let's be honest, I probably haven't cleaned the bathrooms in like weeks because that's just how it goes. So if it's not those things, then what creates peace? I turned to the word and just found a few verses that I wanted to touch on. First, peace begins with the spirit, not the space. In 1 Peter 3, it says, let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So this is talking obviously about like physical beauty, and it reminds us that true beauty doesn't come from what's visible, it comes from the spirit within us. And I think that the same verse can be applied to our homes. Even in a loud, messy, and chaotic environment, the gentle and quiet spirit of a woman can anchor the entire home. And how do we cultivate that? I think by prioritizing our own relationships with God through time in the Word and in prayer, because that's going to allow us to produce the fruits of the Spirit that others can feel when they walk through the door. The next section that gets referenced a lot when talking about women is Proverbs 31. So this chapter paints a picture of a woman who is diligent, kind, and grounded in the fear of the Lord. She's trusted by her husband, praised by her children, and the entire tone of the home flows from her. In verse 26, it says that she opens her tongue with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. So what we say and how we say it also help set the tone in our homes. Words that are wise and kind don't just calm a room, they shape hearts. I have a little thing on the fridge upstairs, and I haven't really had to or gotten to use it very much yet because Weston, although he understands a lot of words, still doesn't understand a lot of words. But it's just a chart that has wise words for moms, and it just has like the situation that you might be dealing with, whether it's like your son or daughter is being disobedient, or you're really stressed, or like it has a situation on the left, and then it has a biblical way to respond and verses associated, and then like a heart probing question for your children. And I love that because I can see myself in a few months, a few years, when the kids are a little bit older and they can actually understand a lot of what I'm saying. I can see myself in situations literally stopping, going to that, like, and reading it, because I want what I say not to just be based on emotion, but based on biblical truth. And then verse 27 in Proverbs 31 follows, and it says, she watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. So this isn't about perfection. Like, not every affair of our household has to be like right on track, perfectly lined up, but it's about purpose. We don't need to run ourselves into the ground trying to do it all, but we are called to be intentional stewards of our home. And as women, especially those of us who want to be home with our children, our God-given design gives us a unique ability, I think, to lead in creating a space that nurtures life and faith.
I like how you touched on words, because when we originally were talking about this podcast idea, I was like, setting your tone in the home, like my home's not put together. It's not perfect. Like you said, like that is like what comes to mind when I think of like setting the tone and having like a peaceful and calm home. But like you said, that doesn't have to be the case. And I think words are like one of the most important thing, because I was asking Matt last night about like what to say. It's like, I don't know. And he was saying like creating an environment of like trust, love, and like accountability. And I think a lot of that comes with your words and your actions. And I don't have like any parenting advice because I'm not yet a parent. But as far as like our marriage goes, just like constantly being supportive in the home and having that be a place where he can come to after a long, hard day at work, because he does some interesting things for work, and just being, or coming back from a deployment, just having it be like a place where he feels safe. And because he doesn't always feel like safe at work, so allowing this to be the place where he can kind of decompress and relax. And I think practical ways I can help do that is to be encouraging with my words and supportive and be there for him and be tuned into what's happening in his life and encouraging him in that, speaking scripture over him, and just being selfless and doing things for him. So that is something that he brought up. So it's something, I mean, I can also work on because I know that's something that is important to him. But yeah, I think words, like you said, are very important, whether it's teaching your children or encouraging your children or encouraging your husband.
And I'll get into this later when I talk about some practical advice. But in order to do that, in order to like be ready with encouraging words, or in order to actually create an environment that like builds up and supports, you have to manage the pace that you're moving. Like, if you're moving at 1,000,000,000 miles an hour, then when Matt comes home from work, like, you're not gonna be ready to receive his heart and, like, steward that conversation well or anything like that. Like, we have to be able to we have to prepare for it, honestly. Like, we have to be ready for when our kids one day ask us, like, a really deep theological question in the middle of breakfast. Like, we have to know what our priorities are and be ready for it. Just not necessarily, like, preparation, like, we have to have the right words to say and, like, everything outlined. It's just, no, we have to have our hearts always, and this goes for all of life, honestly, even, like, when we're at work. Like, we have to have our hearts ready to receive other people's hearts. Like, does that make sense? Like, we have to have a posture of, like, come talk to me, I have time for you.
Yeah, like being open to stop what you're doing and focus on the present, because that's something that's, I mean, I've only really had to deal with it, like, mainly at work and at home sometimes, but, like, when you're working on a project and someone, like, comes to you, needs to talk to you, but you kind of brush them off because you're busy, and you later find out that they, like, really needed you in that moment. So it's good to be in tune and willing to drop the things you're doing for the people around you, because honestly, that project is probably not that important.
Yeah. Especially in regards to eternity. Like, it's definitely not as important as things that'll lead us there. So,
yeah.
Okay, jumping into the next verse, Proverbs 14:1, it says, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears it down." So this verse is sobering. I think that as women, we hold creative and destructive power in our homes. Like we mentioned, our words already, but also our attitudes and just our daily choices. They either build up or they slowly tear down. Wisdom, patience, and grace are things that construct a safe haven, but anger, neglect, or bitterness are kind of things that erode it. So if our husband comes home from work and the first thing I do is just hand my children to my husband and just, why didn't you get home sooner? Like, that slight bitterness, which could be justified some days, like, that's not going to do anything. That's what this verse is talking about, is foolish. Like, our words, the little moments, they matter. And like I also mentioned, we slowly build it up, but we can immediately tear it down. And so that's why we have to be so careful about every moment. Not to put like a ton of pressure on it, but it does take a lot to build that environment, and it doesn't take much to tear it down, because the devil works in annoying, crafty ways. So it's just a good reminder. And then in Titus 2, it says, "Train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands." And we've touched on this verse in the past, just when it comes to, like, should women stay home, especially when they have children. And I don't like to look at this verse as a limitation. I think it's more about influence. A woman who embraces these traits, I think, reflects deep care and cultivates a spiritually rich home environment.
That goes back to something Matt and I were talking about last night, and we were talking about making your house a home. Part of it's like being intentional and purposeful in raising your kids and with each other, and not expecting others to fill in for us. So I think it's just important to be like the sole source of their like biblical upbringing and be really involved in that, because it's not the church's job to raise our kids. It's not like a school's job to raise our kids. Like, it is our job to raise our kids, and just having that in the back of your mind as you go through life. I'm not saying you need to like completely stay at home and you do what works for your family and how you and your husband deem fit for your family, but just no matter what you're doing, making sure that you're their sole influence, and how important that is, because it's so important to center your home around Jesus and the scriptures. And Matt was talking about teaching them and holding each other accountable to have integrity and live the same life that we do at home that we do in public.
Yeah, this kind of takes us off track a little bit, but last night or yesterday when I was cooking dinner, I was listening to a podcast on school choice. Like, should the government pay for kids to be homeschooled or kids to do private school or things like that. Um, and the guy made a really good point that goes along right with what you're saying, that although school choice, especially from a Christian, like homeschool, private school, like perspective, sounds really great. Like, yeah, it'd be great to have support in that. It'd be great for more people to want to choose homeschool and private school. But his comment was, if we're going to let the government pay for things like that, then doesn't it kind of just mimic public school? And eventually, one, there's like the influence side. Like, eventually, if they're paying for it, then they're going to require some standards and influence and things that like we could or could not agree with depending on the climate. But also he was talking about how it takes the burden of responsibility off of parents, which sounds good, just hearing that. But that's not what we want. Like, we as parents should feel the burden and responsibility of being in charge of what our kids learn, consume, how their days are structured. Like, we want to feel, even if that is being intentional about choosing a private school or something like that, like either way, we need to feel that. And I think it's okay to feel that burden. So it was just an interesting thing. But yeah, we do have a lot of influence and with our families, and we need to steward it wisely. So I'll jump into some practical tips now for setting the tone in our home. I do feel like 3 years out of the academy, especially, this didn't happen for me. Like, I didn't feel like I really like had any sort of rhythms. Well, I feel like I still don't. But in reflection, after our friend was visiting last week, I was realizing just the difference from 3 years ago to now. Like, when we first moved into a home, first got married, to now, like, there are things that I do feel like I have figured out. I'm not going to say I've arrived. I don't know that I'll ever feel like I've fully arrived and have everything perfectly outlined, structured, and everything. And there's still women that I look up to. I'm like, how, like, you have it all perfectly put together. Like, I think we all feel that way about people who are above us. But looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, 3 years, like, we have grown. So the first tip that I have is to treat your home like your job. I think this will become especially important when we are staying home and it is our full-time job. But whether you work outside of the home or not, if you view your responsibilities with the same intentionality, then it'll help you make sure that they get done. At work, you show up on time, you plan, and you make sure you complete your tasks. And I think our homes deserve that same structure and respect. So that's my first piece of practical advice. Number 2 is to automate whatever you can. So take the guesswork out of things. Like, know throughout your week which days are laundry days. Have a meal plan. Know what needs cleaning and when it needs cleaning. I think having a routine helps, especially if you're working and especially if you have kids. Having a routine helps reduce some of the decision fatigue and increase the follow through. So if you just know you're going to clean something, instead of having to sit there and think about the things you have to do for 30 minutes, you're just going to do the things you have to do. So it takes a little bit more work on the front end, and it's always changing, like, my schedule of how often I do things based on the season of life. Like, postpartum, like early postpartum, you're probably not going to be on top of it as much as you want to. But once you get into routine, or once we're working, like, once we're not working, like, all these things are going to affect it. But just constantly kind of revisiting that schedule and having things automated on a weekly basis, I think has helped me a lot. Number 3 is to identify your priorities. So for you, maybe it's a home cooked meal. Maybe it's having cleaned floors. Like, maybe it's just having one room that's always tidy. Whatever your personal priorities are, do the most important thing first. That way, if you run out of time, the essential things are done, because you're not going to get every single thing done that you want to get done in a day. Especially now that I have a toddler, I'm like, man, I don't know how people do it, because it's just it's just unknown. Like, he could just sit there and play quietly by himself, and I have a lot of time to get things done, or he could not, and he could miss bedtime, and he could have trouble sleeping, and I could not get anything done until 10 p.m. Like, it every day changes, and so you just have to pick the most important things. And that kind of goes along with too what I mentioned earlier about not living a hurried life. If you're constantly rushing from one activity to the next, outside of the home, like if you're going from school to sports to family trips, like then there's no time for any of this. Like not only is there not time to steward hearts well, but there's also not time to create any sort of structure within the house. And that's how I grew up, and it was amazing. And I feel like we thrived on busyness, but also I've enjoyed, and I think that our friend last weekend I felt this like on a Sunday afternoon after church, like, "What are you guys doing today?" It's like, "Oh, we're nothing. We're staying home. We are resting." And I think that that's refreshing in today's culture. And then the last thing that I have that ties all of these things, I think, together is don't let the urgent steal from the important. Just remember that the dishes can wait, but having a deep conversation with your husband or children can't. Your child's hearts can't wait. Um, you may never regret skipping vacuuming the floors, but you will regret missing the sacred small moments that build relationships both with your family and with the Lord. So, yeah, tyranny of the urgent. If you haven't ever heard of that concept, definitely look it up.
No, I'm taking all of your practical tips because I'm not very great in this area. I mean, we don't
Well,
have
and
kids yet, so
having
it's just
kids
like,
forces you to do it. And that's
yeah.
what's crazy. It's like when you have all the time in the world, this doesn't it doesn't seem like a need. And then
hmm
as soon as your time gets limited, then your time becomes far more productive. Like it's really cool, I think. Like it's a shift. Like you're especially with breastfeeding, like you're gonna feel just your time, you're like, "Oh, I don't have time for anything." Like everything is based around this child, and that's true, but it forces some really cool new habits, I think.
Because I'm most productive when I have a lot to do. So I feel like, but yeah, we've been talking about how our schedule and routine will have to change a lot. Because right now we just clean on the weekends, but like I don't want to spend every weekend when I have a child cleaning because especially when Matt is gone, I feel like it takes me all day to clean. So I'm definitely going to have to implement different things when he is gone and when he's here. So that way it doesn't like eat up our whole day. But I don't have many practical tips because I feel like I'm new at this. So I'm learning from you because it'll change all in a few months. But one thing I was thinking about is that like a house is just a place, but a home is where people grow together and become sanctified together. But, and then one practical thing I feel like I can bring is whenever military you move a lot, but in general, like whenever you're curating a home, like you don't have to get all of the newest and best things and make your home like perfect. Like honestly, a lot of our stuff is from Facebook Marketplace, and I think pieces from there are nicer anyway because they have a little bit more character and are a little bit older than like what you could get at Amazon or Target. So that's just like a practical way. You don't need anything in your home, but I think getting a bunch of different pieces from a bunch of different places can help you kind of curate your comfort, cozy home on a more practical level.
Yeah. When we left Virginia Beach, so when Weston was like 5 months old, I think, um, I got rid of all of my what I call copy and paste decor. So things that not to diss on Hobby Lobby because I love Hobby Lobby, but like things that you can buy that are just like mass produced that come from Target or Hobby Lobby. Like I got rid of most of that stuff because it didn't mean anything and it was just becoming a burden on our life more than a blessing. And especially, I'm looking at the room right now, especially when you have like toys and different things for a toddler, like the less stuff you have, I feel like the better sometimes. And then to acquire slowly the meaningful pieces. Like I finally realized when we moved after like being in the one first house, I was like, wow, okay, I don't have to build my entire collection of Christmas decor in 1 year. Like I have years to acquire the things that my children will remember as our family's Christmas decor. Like that's just one example, but just take your time, make sure things are meaningful that'll help both financially and with just like the amount of clutter and stress in your home because physical things take up mental space, which is annoying, but it's just how it works. So thank you everyone for joining us. Just as a final thought, just remember you don't need a perfect home, just a peaceful heart that reflects the love of Christ. That's what people remember when they walk out the door. And that's what creates a safe, calm, and belonging. So let's be women who build, women who steward their homes with grace, women who reflect the love of God in how we live, lead, and love, starting right where we are. Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed the episode, and I want to encourage you, if you're not subscribed to, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not subscribed, or if you're watching on Spotify and you're not following whatever platform you're listening to, we just ask nicely that you would do that, just because it would be a really big encouragement to us, and it would encourage us to keep making these videos, this podcast. And if you would share it with a friend, our simple goal is to point people back to the truth that we think is going to sustain not only this country, but the truth that we believe leads to eternity. So thank you for joining us. We love you all. And with that, this has been Erin and Liz helping you mind your mission.